Hello, everyone. Welcome to our English conversation program. How are you today? I hope you're all fine. This first Saturday of September, we are very delighted to bring you this broadcast from Nara, an ancient capital of Japan.
Hello, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here and to introduce our guest this month, Mr. George Aiste, Assistant Professor of English at the International Buddhist University in Osaka. Let's see what he has to say.
Well, Professor Aiste, we are very happy to have you in NHK's Nara studio today, and it's very nice of you to come.
It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone.
May I ask you, do you live near here?
Actually not. As you know, the studio is located right next to the beautiful Nara Deer Park. I live near the Horyuji Temple, which is about 40 minutes from here.
I see.
Now, can I begin by asking a bit about yourself? Where were you born, and where did you grow up, for instance?
Well, I was born in downtown Los Angeles in California, and spent the first 23 years of my life there. Among different things that I did was, of course, work a little bit part-time in Hollywood. I made 2 or 3 movies. One movie financed my trip to Tokyo, where I studied for a year.
Oh.
And I also had the pleasure of working for about 3 years at Disneyland.
How nice.
I'm sure many of the listeners have had a chance to visit Disneyland, and perhaps some of them may have even met me at Disneyland.
May I ask what your job was there?
I was, you might call an interpreter. I worked to help the Japanese who visited Disneyland when they had troubles.
Oh, my. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go to college, and what did you major in?
I went to the University of Southern California, and they have a quite extensive Asian Studies program. And at USC, I was able to major in Japanese. And as part of that, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, came to Tokyo and studied at Waseda University for about a year. After my experience there, I found that Japanese have considerable problems in learning English. And so I returned to the University of Southern California, where I started to study teaching English to foreigners.
Professor Aiste, can you tell us a bit more about your eventful life, I should say, when you were at my alma mater, Waseda?
Well, at the period of time I was there, which was in 1968-69, as you may remember, it was quite turmoil on campus. And so, as a matter of fact, I didn't spend too much time studying at Waseda. I did spend an awful lot of time, however, traveling around, staying at youth hostels, and just wandering around, walking the streets of Tokyo, talking to shopkeepers, and learning about Japan.
Back to talking again about your college life in the States. You mentioned that you started off by majoring in Asian Studies. May I ask you why you chose Asian Studies?
That's a very difficult question.
I'm sorry.
Because, as a matter of fact, it happened when I was in high school, and I wanted to study music and become a music teacher. This was my goal. But my high school had a very poor music program, so in order to transfer to another school which offered a good music program, I had to study Japanese in order to justify changing schools. But once into the program, of course, I found it was a very, very exciting field of study, and I soon dropped my music and went full-time into studying Japanese and Japanese culture.
So you have music to thank for your interest in Japan.
Yes, isn't that strange?
It's interesting.
So you started learning Japanese when you were in high school?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, my first trip to Japan was on a high school excursion.
No, but I didn't think there were so many high schools which offer courses in Japanese in those days.
At the time, there were very few. In Los Angeles, as a matter of fact, there were only 8 high schools. Now there are many more, of course, as Japanese and Japanese culture is a very popular study both in the United States and in Europe.
And may I ask what and where you're currently teaching?
Well, right now I'm teaching English at the International Buddhist University, abbreviated IBU.
Not ICU.
Not ICU, no.
Confusing.
A little difference between Christianity and Buddhism, I believe. But basically, I'm teaching communication courses, both conversation and reading and writing skills.
And what is the most difficult aspect of your teaching, can I ask?
Well, I don't know that there are any real difficult aspects. Fortunately, the students are all very good and study very hard, so teaching really becomes a pleasure.
Then what about some of the most pleasant aspects of your career?
Well, perhaps being able to accompany the students all over the world every summertime.
Oh.
As you know, I've just come back from England, where I took a group of our students to study at Oxford.
Oh, how exciting. And
I'd like to ask you, excuse me, shifting a bit from your travels, to describe your university in general to us, and along with this study abroad program you just mentioned.
Well, as you can see by the name of the university, International Buddhist University is a very strange combination, I think. And you can look at it in two ways. You can attach the international to Buddhism, or you can attach the international to university. And I think at this period in time when modern society is becoming more international and global, the need for international education is very important. Our university feels that all students, not only English majors, need both language and cultural experience outside of the Japanese culture. So, for example, we require all students, whether they're Buddhist majors or history majors, education majors, whatever their major might be, to study an additional 8 units of English conversation and practical English. And at the same time, the university provides many opportunities for the students to go overseas, including the one that I just came back from.
So you have quite a large percentage of your students who have been abroad then?
Yes, I think so. Probably close to half of our students will eventually go abroad before they graduate.
Oh, I see.
And is the school designed for the would-be priests?
No, not necessarily. It's designed for would-be Japanese who are going into the world, I guess, like any other university.
Would-be cosmopolitan.
Yes.
And Buddhism is certainly, Professor Aiste, the one aspect of Japanese culture, but I wonder what are some of the other aspects of Japanese culture or tradition you are interested in?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. Of course, I'm interested in Japanese cuisine. As the listeners can't tell, if you can visualize myself, I'm as tall as Takamiyama and a little more than half his weight. So I love to eat. And Japanese food, of course, is one of my most energetic field of research.
I'm sorry, do you have any special favorites?
Well, in this season, it's just coming into all kinds of good things. But basically anything.
I see.
I just like food, yes. I'm also very interested in Japanese history, which is perhaps the reason I'm living in Nara, and literature, music, and all of the other things that go along with Japan.
You said that you're interested in Japanese history in any special aspect?
Well, yes, mainly old history. I like the Asuka period, the Tumulus period, and into the Nara period is really my favorite era. But yes, I like all of Japanese history. It's very fascinating.
And do you have anything in particular, say paintings or architecture or history of governmental system, or what aspect of Japanese literature, culture and history?
Yes.
Everything.
Yes.
It's a
Well,
yes across the board.
As a matter of fact, they're all very interrelated. And especially, well, I guess all cultures are the same, but history, politics, the arts, they're all so tightly interwoven that it's really impossible to study one without paying attention to the others.
That's true.
Well, you mentioned just now that you're interested in the Nara period, and I think certainly in this city we can get some kind of a sense of what traditional Japan must have been like. Anyway, I'd like to ask you, do you have any favorite places or any favorite things or particular interests in the city of Nara itself?
Well, of course. If you ask me what my favorite place is, I'm afraid it's impossible to answer. Mm-hmm. That depends on the day, that depends on the weather, and depends on many things. Mm-hmm. But Nara is, I think, unique in that many of our old temples and artifacts remain here much as they were in the old days. If you go to Kyoto, for example, the city around has been so developed that it's sometimes hard to imagine what the atmosphere used to be 1,000, 1,500 years ago. But here in Nara, many of the most famous temples are still literally just out in the rice paddies. Mm-hmm. And the number of tourist buses are considerably less. So I think you really can get a much more accurate feeling of what Japan used to be like. Also, we have so many different festivals and other kinds of cultural events literally throughout the year. Coming up in the next month, we're going to have our deer rodeo, which is, I think, unique only in Nara, where they round up all of the deer in the deer park and cut their antlers off in a rather spectacular ceremony.
And I understand that you were born and grew up in a big city, and you also lived in Tokyo. Then after living in big cities, when you came to Nara for the first time, how did you find life here? And you find it, you like it all right now?
At first it really took a conscious effort to slow down. Tokyo is a very fast and busy city. My hometown of Los Angeles as well, of course, is a lot of rushing around. But Nara is exactly the opposite. And even going into Osaka, which is only a half an hour's train ride away, life is so much slower. But after 2 or 3 years, I think I've pretty well adjusted to it here, and I don't think I'd want to go back to Tokyo again.
Well, you seem to be used to big city life and also the peaceful life here. I'd like to ask you about your travel experiences, either in or outside of Japan. You said you majored in Asian studies, so have you been able to travel to any other countries in Asia?
In Asia, actually, very few. I've been to Hong Kong and Singapore, and that's about all. I had planned to go to Korea many years ago, but due to a typhoon, I had to put off my trip, and unfortunately I stayed in a few youth hostels in Japan where I met my wife, so I guess I traded Korea for a wife.
How nice to have met your wife that way. You said, though, that you often accompany students on study abroad programs, so I know that you've been to Oxford, and have you been other places as well?
Yes, the university sends students here and there, also in looking for pilot programs to send students here and there. Just last year, I had a very wonderful opportunity to visit the Middle East.
Oh,
our university has just opened up an Arabic studies department, and so I went to Jordan and Egypt and places like that in order to find future sites for our students to go to.
I'm sorry, I'm not very well informed about the use of English in that area. Could you make any comment on that?
It is very different, you're right. This is a big problem with, I guess, the new international English that's going around these days. Of course, I'm an American, and when I go to Oxford, for example, I have to adjust my English to meet theirs, and to a certain extent they adjust their English to meet mine. But there's so many other areas of the world which are also English-speaking. For example, Egypt is an English-speaking country, as well as Arabic, of course. But their English is considerably different. But more than the differences, I think, for the students, the sameness is more important, I think. Because English still is one language, even though there are many different dialects. And whether you go to England, or whether you go to Egypt, or Singapore, Hong Kong, whether you go to America or Canada, we all, as native speakers, can communicate.
True.
And our students, of course, in Japan, have to be able to communicate with all of those different cultures and all of those different people.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to say, but that's all the time we have today, and would you mind coming over again to talk to us next week?
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to.
That's all for today. So long, everyone.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.